The first time I knew something was wrong was when two words appeared next to my name on a patent draft I never approved. Internal use. Owned by Executive Holdings LLC. They expected panic. They expected me to call HR, maybe storm into legal, maybe beg for clarification. Instead, I went home, opened an old filing cabinet in my apartment, pulled out a yellowed contract from more than a decade ago, and smiled. One clause. Just one. The kind no executive ever reads. But my lawyer did. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't a loss. It was leverage. My name is Evelyn. Most people at Corvex Technologies call me Ev. I'm 34 years old, the chief engineer, and for more than a decade I poured everything I had into building the AI backbone of this company. I watched CEOs rotate in and out like seasonal decor. Strategies changed. Logos changed. Values were rewritten every few years. But I stayed. I was the constant. Until Colton Reeves walked through the glass doors and decided he owned everything I was. The acquisition happened quietly. Too quietly. No town halls. No real explanation. Most of us found out through LinkedIn updates and a vague email about strategic alignment. One week we were an independent automation firm. The next, we belonged to an investment group nobody had heard of, with Reeves installed as CEO. He showed up in a suit that probably cost more than my first car and wore the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. The kind of man who talked about vision while calculating margins in his head. He shook hands. He learned names. He complimented projects he clearly didn't understand. And then, on a Tuesday morning, he called an all-hands meeting. I remember the day clearly because I'd finished debugging a critical safety patch at 3:47 a.m. and was running on espresso and muscle memory. Reeves stood at the podium, voice smooth, polished, confident. He talked about synergy. About optimization. About preparing the company for an IPO. And then he said the quiet part out loud. All intellectual property developed during employment, or related to our core systems, will be consolidated under Executive Holdings LLC. The slide behind him was filled with legal language designed to look harmless. Around me, engineers shifted in their seats. Some looked confused. Others already knew what it meant. I felt something else. Calm. Cold. Focused. The BOF Predictive Safety System. My system. The one I designed during sleepless nights in my kitchen, scribbled first on napkins, built on equipment I paid for myself. The AI that could predict industrial failures before they happened. It had already saved Corvex millions in liability. And now Reeves wanted to stamp his company's name on it like a barcode. He kept talking. Transition timelines. Integration plans. Future growth. I barely heard him. I was already texting my lawyer. 4 words. Check paragraph 7. Her reply came less than 2 minutes later. Already reviewing. Don't say anything yet. I didn't. I smiled into my coffee mug while Reeves soaked in the room's attention, completely unaware he was standing on a trapdoor he didn't know existed. After the meeting, as people shuffled out quietly, Reeves stopped me. Evelyn, right? I've heard incredible things about your work. He said it like praise, but his eyes were already measuring what I was worth to him. That BOF system is going to take us to the next level. I nodded. It took years to build. Well, now it's part of something bigger, he said. You should be proud. I met his gaze. Oh, I'm very proud. He smiled, satisfied. He thought the conversation was over. It wasn't. It just hadn't started yet. Back at my desk, I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the contract. My original employment agreement. Signed in 2011. Page 4. Section 7. Subsection C. Any invention developed outside standard working hours, using personal equipment, without company facilities or proprietary information, remains the sole property of the employee. I remembered the HR manager laughing when I insisted on that clause. Planning to invent something revolutionary in your spare time, she joked. I'd smiled and said, maybe. They signed it without hesitation. Why wouldn't they? I was young. Unknown. Replaceable. Or so they thought. That night, my apartment became a command center. I pulled out everything. Development journals. Timestamped code commits from my personal laptop. Receipts for sensors and processors bought with my own credit card. Videos of early prototypes failing on my kitchen table. Audio recordings of late-night testing sessions, my voice tired and frustrated at 2 in the morning. Coffee machines. Traffic outside my window. Proof that this work happened on my time, in my space, with my resources. My lawyer, Dana, arrived with takeout and a look of professional excitement she rarely showed. This is airtight, she said, flipping through the evidence. They don't own this. Not legally. Not even close. I nodded. They're going to try anyway. Of course they will, she said. Men like Reeves always do. We incorporated a shell company that night. Rowan Systems LLC. Quiet. Clean. Ready. The patent transfer paperwork was prepared but not filed. Not yet. We were waiting. Reeves would make the first move. He had to. Investors were coming. He'd want to show off the patent portfolio. Claim the crown jewel. And when he did, we'd remind him that ownership wasn't something you could declare into existence. The next week, I acted normal. I attended meetings. I submitted reports. I smiled at Reeves in the hallway. He mistook professionalism for compliance. Meanwhile, Dana prepared cease and desist letters and licensing frameworks. We weren't planning a tantrum. We were planning a correction. The meeting came sooner than expected. A closed-door session. HR, legal. Reeves. A folder slid across the table. Of clarification document. A retroactive assignment of all my work. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, this doesn't apply to me. Reeves laughed. Legal frowned. HR panicked. I explained the clause. The room went quiet. Reeves' smile disappeared. That's a technicality, he said. That's the law, I replied. I stood up, left the document unsigned, and told them my lawyer would be in touch. When I walked out, I knew something fundamental had shifted. They'd realized I wasn't bluffing. And I'd realized just how desperate they were going to become. By the time I got home, Dana was already drafting the notice. 48 hours. That's what we gave them. 48 hours to acknowledge reality or lose access to the system they'd built their future around. I poured myself a drink and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere up there, Colton Reeves was scrambling, finally reading a contract he should have read before trying to steal something that wasn't his. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was preparation. The storm hadn't hit. But it was coming. And when it did, everything would change. The moment the deadline started ticking, the building changed. You could feel it in the air. Conversation stopped when I walked past. Doors closed a little faster. Reeves stopped smiling entirely. His emails went from polished corporate optimism to clipped, impatient demands. He thought pressure would scare me into compliance. He didn't realize pressure was the environment I'd been working in for years. That night, Dana called me while I was still at my desk. They're panicking, she said. Legal is tearing apart your old contract line by line. They didn't expect custom language from 2011. I leaned back in my chair and watched the city glow through the glass. They never do, I said. What's their move? They'll try to force assignment, she replied. Then they'll threaten litigation. Then they'll offer money. I smiled. Let them run the whole playbook. We're ready. The next morning, I was summoned to a conference room that smelled like leather chairs and bad decisions. Reeves sat at the head of the table. HR to his left. Outside counsel to his right. 3 against 1. A classic corporate intimidation setup. A document slid toward me. This one was heavier. Broader. More aggressive. This simply confirms what's already true, Reeves said, his voice tight. All intellectual property related to Corvex systems belongs to us. I didn't touch the paper. It doesn't, I said calmly. And pretending it does doesn't make it so. The lawyer leaned forward. Work-for-hire doctrine requires company resources, I interrupted. Which I didn't use. Reeves' jaw tightened. You're being unreasonable. I looked at him steadily. No. I'm being precise. Silence fell. The kind that tells you something irreversible has just happened. I stood, left the document unsigned, and said the words that changed everything. My lawyer will be contacting you about licensing terms. Reeves stared at me like he just realized the floor beneath him was gone. By noon, Dana had sent the notice. License termination pending. 48 hours. The system that powered Corvex's flagship safety platform would stop authenticating without a valid agreement. They laughed at first. Called it a bluff. Then their engineers opened the code. That's when the calls started. Ev, one of them whispered over the phone, the authentication protocol is baked into the kernel. We can't bypass it without rebuilding everything. That rebuild would take over a year. And they'd lose the machine learning data that made the system valuable. I hung up and forwarded the message to Dana. She replied with one word. Good. The real panic began when clients noticed. Fort Dynamics called first. Then Aegis Manufacturing. Then Steelbridge. Every contract had the same clause. All technology must be properly licensed. Failure to comply triggers immediate review. Reeves had sold them certainty. Safety. Reliability. And now they were learning he didn't own the core technology at all. By the end of the day, Corvex's stock had dropped double digits. Tech blogs picked up the story. An anonymous employee leaked slides from investor decks with Reeves' name next to my system. Reporters started asking questions executives hate answering. Who actually owns this? Did investors know? Is this fraud? Dana called me late that night. They're offering money. How much? Enough to make most people blink. I didn't blink. No assignment, I said. License only. On my terms. The deadline expired at 6 a.m. I was awake, coffee in hand, staring at the admin panel on my laptop. 17 systems. All green. All waiting. My finger hovered over the command I'd written years ago, back when I promised myself no one would ever take this from me. At 6:01, the dashboard began to change. One by one, the systems failed authentication. Green to red. Fort Dynamics offline. Aegis offline. Steelbridge offline. 17 installations across 3 continents went dark. My phone exploded. I didn't answer. Dana didn't either. We watched the cascade in silence. This wasn't chaos. It was consequence. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. Reeves' voice was unrecognizable. "We accept," he said. "We accept your terms." Dana leaned over and mouthed, "In writing." I smiled. "Send the agreement," I said. "And remove your name from all documentation related to the system." Silence. Then a defeated exhale. Done. The wire transfer arrived before the ink dried. 8 figures. Annual licensing. Non-transferable. My name restored. His erased. I flipped the switches back to green. Systems came online one by one. Factories resumed. Safety alerts reactivated. The crisis ended as quickly as it began. But the damage was done. By noon, the board had removed Reeves. Security escorted him out of the building he thought he owned. The same building where he tried to intimidate me into signing away my work. Engineers watched from their desks. Some cheered quietly. Others just stared, processing the idea that one of their own had stood up and won. That afternoon, Dana and I signed the final documents for Rowan Systems. What started as a defensive shell became a real company overnight. Licensing inquiries flooded in. Companies that had ignored me for years suddenly wanted meetings. Respect has a funny way of appearing once ownership is undeniable. That evening, I went home and opened the old notebook again. Coffee stains. Napkin sketches. The first rough diagram of the system everyone had fought over. On the inside cover, I'd written something years earlier, half joking, half serious. "Someone will try to take this. Be ready." I closed the notebook and smiled. I had been ready. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I understood something most people learn too late. If you don't protect what you build, someone else will try to claim it. And they'll call it business. Now, my system runs under my name, on my terms, saving lives the way it was always meant to. Corvex still exists. It always will. Companies survive. Executives rotate. But the industry remembers. They remember the CEO who didn't read the fine print. They remember the engineer who did. And somewhere in a boardroom right now, someone is rereading an old contract a little more carefully. As for me, I'm back where I started. At my kitchen table. Coffee cooling beside me. A fresh napkin. A new idea taking shape. Because that's what engineers do. We build. We protect what we build. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get to keep it. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-world inspired corporate stories. I'd love to know your thoughts. What would you have done in my position? Drop a comment below and let's talk.